Changed. A collection of answers to 3 simple but powerful questions. 1. Describe yourself before the change. 2. Describe the moment of the change. 3. Describe yourself since the change.
Well, I was raised in a Christian home, but along the lines, I took matters into my own hands, and I ended up becoming this really broken and sad human being at a very young age. I think in high school it got really bad because I was struggling maintaining my Christian values and the pressure of being a high school student and what surrounded me, and I actually ended up falling into a really deep depression, and along those lines I ended up doing a lot of things that I regretted, and which escalated really, really quick. I mean, by the time I was 17, I was married. 18, I had my child, and at the age of 20, I was divorced, and so I lived 5 years from 20 to about 24, 25, just a life full of sin that I can't even, it's such a blur to me because I wasn't sober throughout most of it, and it was really hard for me to accept that I needed help. Nobody could tell me that this was a way of doing something. My mom would constantly encourage me to go back to church, and I wanted to stay away from it as much as possible just because growing up, I didn't have the most affectionate father, and I failed relationships, and for some reason I had this idea that the cause of all my pain was due to a man. So the idea of God being a man was very hard for me to submit to, and it took a lot to get to the point where I knew that enough was enough, and I ended up making a really drastic move to better the life of my son and myself, moving to Miami from Arizona, which is completely just irrational. But in that process, I felt so alone. If I didn't already feel alone, it was amplified. And my dad ended up leaving my mom, and I was so confused. I didn't even know. I felt really numb. I was no longer angry. I was no longer sad. I was just numb. I just couldn't believe everything that my family and I were going through. We were going through, and I ended up coming back to Tucson, and as soon as I moved back in with my parents, my dad moved out, and I ended up taking charge of everything. I became the provider of a household that wasn't mine, and it was such a weird feeling. But I remember that numbness every night, having to drink myself to sleep because I couldn't sleep, and just feeling broken. So I remember my sister sending me a text message, just basically asking me how I was doing, and I had nothing. I was the biggest negative Nancy ever known. And I remember her telling me and my mom that Pastor Warner had told her to tell us that it was time to come home. So I remember chuckling at that and kind of just brushing it off, hearing my mom tell me what my sister had said. And but at the same time, I knew that something needed to take place. So I remember it was October 12th, 2011. We ended up coming to the service, and Pastor Alvin was preaching, and he happened to be preaching on rejection, and I was infuriated. I was so mad. I told my sister, I was like, you planned this? I was so angry because everything he had talked about, it was just everything that I was dealing with. And but that day, I didn't want to raise my hand when they pulled the altar call, just because I felt so angry, and the tears that were flowing down, they weren't from being sad. I was so angry, and I didn't know how to respond to that. And I remember going home and just telling my mom we were talking about the service, and she was so happy that she had come back to the service and she felt comfortable. And I remember that night, I ended up praying, and I mean, it was a bunch of tears and tissues everywhere, but I remember telling God that I knew that I had messed up, but that I couldn't do it on my own anymore. I was tired. So I told him that if he wanted to, he could take control. I asked him to. I needed to be healed, to be restored. It's just too much. And so for the first time in years, I was able to fall asleep without drinking. And I knew that day that it was real. That everything that I was fighting against for so long was exactly what I needed in my life. So I went back to church that following Sunday, and I ended up answering the altar call, and it was so much easier because I already had that power fueled by God and the confidence in what I was doing. And so I responded to the altar call, and I basically locked the decision that I had made, that no matter what came my way, that there was no other way. I was rejected by the world, and I would rather 100 times be sad being a Christian than being sad in the world. And so it hasn't been easy, but I have this hope, this daily hope, and I'm so sensitive to the Holy Spirit and things being easily convicted and stuff like that. I just, like, as silly as seeing a bird flying, I think God communicates in those sweet ways with me, just as an encouragement to me daily. And I have my situation. I don't want to say that my situation is the same, because it's still my son, my mom, and myself. I don't know. It's just so different. It's something that you definitely need to experience it for yourself. I'm healthier, my family's healthier. We don't feel like there's just this negative cloud over us. But we have lasting relationships, in the church that we go to, and people see it. I think that's been one of the biggest things for me, is that I have friends that stuck around even after I got saved, and that they're like, I cannot believe you don't go out and drink the way you used to, or you don't party, or just all these things. And they can see it in my face, like, because I mean, not being sober and then having this radical change in your life, it does something to you physically that people can see. And from going to being that negative Nancy that everybody would call out, to being all of a sudden sunshine, and you're such a ray of sunshine. I would never expected that, but it's what it is. It's a lot healthier, happier. Like I said, I have my bad days where I'm like, Jesus, help me. But I think that's exactly where we need to be. Never in a comfort zone where we just forget that we are in such desperate need of God. And so I'm okay with it. I'm okay with needing God on a daily basis. My name is Stephanie Salgado, and on the 12th of October 2011, I was changed.